welcome to today's graphic design tip of the day. For today's tip, we're going into Adobe Illustrator to learn the basics of the program. I created Illustrator Basics Page 1, which you can find in the description below to get started. So the first thing we're going to do is open up that page and make sure you lock the layer. You just click the little icon that's right next to it to lock it. And we're going to create a new layer with the new layer button right here that's next to the trash to have a blank layer to start on top of. For the first step, it asks us to draw a circle, but not just using the shape tool. We could grab the ellipse tool, hold down the shift key on your keyboard and stretch a circle. But this one wants us to actually draw the circle using the pen tool. So I'm going to grab my pen tool located right here on my toolbar. And I'm going to start by clicking right on one of the sides of my circle. And my first line is going to be straight up and down. If you hold down your shift key on your keyboard while you stretch this, it'll keep it exactly vertical. And then if I go into my next point here and hold down shift again, it'll keep it exactly horizontal. For my next point again, holding down shift to keep it exactly vertical again. And my last one here, hold shift one more time, stretching it exactly horizontal. Before I connect back to the beginning here, stretch that one more time, and I have my circle. Now, depending on what settings are on Illustrator right now for you, you might have no stroke, no fill. It depends on who was on there last, what you did. So if you look at your toolbar on the bottom of it, you're going to see your fill color and your stroke color. The objective of this one is to change it to a 4-point stroke instead of a fill. So what you can do is use your eyedropper tool to grab the exact color of the shape that I have here. Yours won't turn to an automatic stroke because you don't have the Illustrator file. And then we're going to flip-flop your fill color with your stroke color. So using the little arrow icon that's right above it here, you can click that. If you ever need to turn a fill color off or on, you can do that by clicking on it and clicking the little icon underneath with the white background and the red slash through it. Or I can always turn that back on. So that is number one. Now your stroke might not be set to 4. So on your properties menu, we want to bump that up to 4 points for my stroke. And it should look exactly like the one I have. The next step for number 2, we're going to be drawing 2 rectangles. Again, we can go to our shape tool, grab the rectangle tool and hold shift to stretch one. But we want to use the pen tool and practice using the pen tool. So grab your pen tool again, click on that first anchor point, and again hold down the shift key, because as you click around the points of this square, it's going to keep it at exactly 90-degree angles for you. You can also create 45-degree angles using that same technique. And using my eyedropper tool, I'm going to grab that exact color there for a fill color instead of a stroke. Now I want to have one of these that's going to be blue. So I'm going to change that fill color to blue just by double clicking and adjusting it there. And I want a second square that I'm creating to be yellow. So just for practice one more time, holding shift, I'm going to draw a second square here. And this time after I finish it, I'm going to change that fill color to yellow. And this step is teaching us about opacity as well. So once I have my yellow square created, on my properties menu, you can see the option for opacity. I'm going to turn that down to about 50%. So now you can see that I have both a yellow and blue, but when they overlap, you can see that opacity, so it kind of becomes that olive green color in between. Number 3 is creating an isosceles triangle out of a square by removing and manipulating the star tool. So grabbing my star tool, if I hold down shift and stretch a star, you can adjust how many anchor points it has by clicking the down arrow key on your keyboard or up to get more. So that is one way to make a perfect isosceles triangle. If I want it to be that exact same fill color, again, I can use my eyedropper tool and grab that fill. Now the second way to do this is to create a square. So using my rectangle, I'm just going to make a perfect square here. And using my pen tool, go to the Add Anchor Point tool. I'm going to click right in the center of this path to add an anchor point. and use my delete anchor point tool to delete. Now you can use the regular pen tool for this as well. You can see when I hover over an anchor point, it does show that delete anchor point tool, just like it does when you go to the delete anchor point tool. But when you're adding points on a path, I just think it's way easier to make sure that you don't accidentally start a new path to just go right to that add anchor point tool. But all within the pen tool, and you can see that we have a very similar triangle. Using the polygon shape tool, we're now going to manipulate the anchor points to create a star. So again, there is a star tool. I could just stretch that. I would have to add more points back to it with my plus icon to create a star. But instead of doing that, we're going to start with the polygon tool this time. And I'm not going to make this the same color as the original. You'll see why here in a second. It'll be easier to use it as a template that way. So using my pen tool or my add anchor point tool, I'm going to go in the center of each of these paths and drop an anchor point. And now remembering those ones that I just dropped, the ones that are in the middle of the line segments, using my white arrow key or direct selection tool, know the difference between the two. The regular selection tool lets you move the shape around. The direct selection tool, the white arrow key, if you click on an individual anchor point, I can move that anchor point. So I'm going to click on each of these points and pull them in towards the center. One at a time here, just pulling them in, click, and then pull in. But I do have one extra point, so if I did want it to look exactly like this star, I could go back to my delete anchor point tool, remove 2 points off of this star, use my regular move tool, my regular selection tool, to move it over, and then use that white arrow key or direct selection tool to move my anchor points that I have here on my path. Remember, you can always Control plus, Control minus to zoom in if you ever need to. If you're on a Mac, it's Command minus or Command plus instead. And I can use that as a template layer and move my anchor points to match up perfectly with this. So you can see if you are drawing something, even if you aren't the best at drawing, you could really go back and manipulate your anchor points to make them exactly what you would want them to be for whatever you're trying to trace or create. So again, using my eyedropper, I'll grab that yellow so it's exactly the same as my original. And the last thing here is we're going to be creating a heart. Again, there's a couple ways to do this. I'm going to use my circle or ellipse tool to drag a perfect circle and grab that same color that I had here. And starting with my add anchor point tool, I'm going to add an anchor point on each side of my circle. And going to the convert anchor point tool, so it's the last one here underneath the pen tool, it converts anchor points. So if I click on a curve, it turns it into a straight edge. If I was to want a curve back, I could click on it and pull and turn it back into a curve. But I want these both as straight edges on the top and the bottom. Going back to my direct selection tool, I can click on that anchor point and pull it in towards the center. I can use my delete anchor point to delete those 2 anchor points on the outside edges of my heart. And then I can hold shift and use my white arrow key, my direct selection tool, to move those 2 sides of the heart down. If I want a different curve, you can also stretch them to whatever curve you want. So that is one way to create the heart. Second way to create a heart is to click on the center using my regular pen tool. So grab your pen tool, click right in the center and pull up. Now pay attention to the handlebar of your heart. Look at the direction it's going. If you're on a Mac, hold the Option key down. If you're on a PC, hold the Alt key down. And I'm going to make a line that's exactly the opposite of what I had there at the top. Go down to the bottom of your heart, and that's when I'm just going to pull that anchor point up and over. When you're happy with where your curve is, hold down the Option key again or Alt key again and make another exactly the opposite. For that handlebar, I'm still holding down that Option key. And if I go back to that center point here and pull out, I can create another curve that's exactly the same. So just another way to create a heart in a few less steps. I hope you enjoyed today's graphic design tip of the day.